Welcome to the lesson on T&M and service invoices. I'm currently at the JobMaster Pro main menu. Before we can do an invoice, we need to have a job set up and we have to have posted material and labor to the job. So if you haven't done so already, please review the lessons on posting material and labor items to the job. We can find a job many different ways in the program. If you click into Customer Center and bring up the customer, you can go into the Jobs tab, find the invoice or job you've been working on and double click on it. That will bring you into the Customer Center. Or you can go into the Customer Center directly from the JobMaster Pro main menu by clicking the Job button. From here, you can either type in your job number and press enter to bring it up. Or, if you don't know your job number, I'm going to exit out of Job Center and go back in so that it's clean and show you a couple of other ways to find jobs in here. You've got your Find button where you can navigate around and look for jobs that way, but I like this idea better. And all of these main center screens, you can click into a field and type something that's appropriate to that field. For example, I know that we installed a receptacle, a dryer receptacle. So if I just type any part of the job description in the job description field and press F5, it will give me a list of all the jobs that had whatever you typed in that field. So I can double click or press enter on the desired job and I'm good to go. Now, I've already posted my material, labor, and my direct items for this job in these three posting screens. So you want to review those lessons on posting material, labor, and direct to your job. How I know that is that I have costs and charges here. But you can see I haven't billed anything out yet. So you're going to see how this all comes together after we do our current billing. Now, one thing I wanted to show you before we do the billing is the job notes. I'm going to click into the Job Notes tab and talk about job notes for a moment. It's kind of got two sides to it, the left side and the right side. In the left side, you can keep ongoing notes about this job forever. And but these job notes that you type in the left side will not be on any invoices. So if I wanted to have notes from the job go over to the invoice, I do it at the right side of the screen in one of these three areas. Now, because an invoice can be broken out into material, labor, and direct, you can actually put notes in each section of the job where you want it to be printed with those items. Now the key here though is to make sure you click your Save button to save those notes, otherwise they won't transfer over to the invoice. Excellent. Now, as I said in my last lesson on posting items, you want to take a trip into the profit preview because this is a look at what will be invoiced on the next invoice. So, although this job has never been invoiced, if it had been invoiced, this is just a look at the uninvoiced items on the job. So, if this is an ongoing T&M job, again, this is just the uninvoiced items on the job. This can be printed out under Options, Print Report. So if you want someone to review it, make sure that your charges are correct, make sure that your margin is what you want it to be, make sure quantities are correct, make sure you didn't forget anything. The whole idea with this thing here is to ensure that we avoid the most common invoicing mistakes out there, okay? Because you know how hard it is to collect on mistakes. You might as well say goodbye. So I'm going to exit the profit preview screen and I'm ready to do my invoice. So I'm going to select Go To on the menu bar, Billing Center. Because I used my Go To, it automatically brought my job number up for me, knowing what I want to invoice for. I'm going to exit out for a moment Because if you come into Billing Center directly from the Job Master Pro main menu, you click the billing button on the toolbar, then you need to tell it what you're doing as you come in here. So you want to click the new button on the toolbar. It brings you down to the job number where you need to enter the job number you're going to do your billing for and press enter. So you're right back where we started. Now before we actually do anything with this invoice, I want to kind of go through some of these key fields here. Because the truth of the matter is, if you come into this Billing Center and you don't have to change anything on the screen, you can either just preview your invoice or just save it and be done with it. But as I come in here, if you're doing this for the first time or you're just learning the billing cycle, this is what you're going to learn. First of all, the invoice type. There are 3 types of invoices that Cobra can provide for you. Now that we're not talking about AIA specifically, because AIA ones are done through the AIA program, but when we talk about T&M jobs or service jobs, we're talking about using a detail invoice type. That's why the D is defaulted there. For progress billings, we're going to use the F for freeform, and that you can see in another lesson called freeform invoicing. The A is very similar to detail invoices, but that's a very specific type of invoicing, so unless I hear the need for it, I don't really get into that too much. You can click into the help system though and find out about activity billings, which is what the A means. Now when we talk about a detail invoice, then we also need to talk about how to format the material and labor on the actual invoice itself, okay? Because you may or may not want to show your customer a lot of detail, depending on the customer. Or you might have a specific format company-wide that you want to use on your detail invoices. Now, format codes are Cobra's way of knowing how to take the material and labor information on the job and format it for the invoice itself. I have preset 2 format codes, the K for material and the small f for labor. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck are they? What do they do? How do you find out what they are? So I'm going to click into the help button on my toolbar, and I'm going to type in format code and press enter. Now we're going to look at what format codes are and how they work. They're very straightforward. When I double click on material format codes, I get the whole topic. Now you may want to print it out so you have a complete visual of all the different format codes. But basically how they work is a very simple concept. What you want to do is kind of hone in on a group here. These are the different groupings of codes right here that explain what the codes within that group do. Now this is the actual most common set of format codes, because most people like to show the material in one way or another. But in the case of this grouping, what this means basically is that when you enter an item onto the job, if the same item is used more than once on the job, this group of codes will group that item into one item on the invoice with one quantity. That's what summarized material by item means. Okay, so this is a very common set of codes. Now these are the actual format codes. I'm using the K one. So by using K, what I'm saying is for my material, summarize my material by item only. But I also want to show the charge for each item and show the quantity for each item. So we're going to use that for our material side. When I double click on the left on the labor format codes, there's a much greater list of labor format codes, so please do print these out, okay? So you want to look at the groupings first, these little headers, to see what makes sense to you. There are a lot more groups here because some people like to show the worker name on the invoice with the rate or the type of hours, and type of hours means straight time, overtime, double time hours. Some people like to show the worker's title on the invoice, and the title just means what class were they set up with in the worker setup screen. Are they apprentice, journeyman, master, foreman, you know, all the different classes that you've already defined when you set up your workers originally. So a lot of different codes here. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to work with these codes. So I'm going to exit out of the help system, back to my billing center. Now I've already predetermined the code that I want to use, or set of codes. So when I click the preview button on the toolbar, I can see what this invoice would look like if I used that set of codes. This is the material. This is the labor section down here. Notice my notes, my material notes, my labor notes. Okay. Now don't worry about discounting or material tax. That's controlled by the job itself. It just so happens that this job was set up with both a discount and material tax. So if I wanted to change the look of this invoice, I can exit right out and change my format codes. So as you're learning the system, you want to play around with these. Print those out. Try different codes. I'm going to show you a vastly different code by selecting U on material, and I'm going to select large A on labor, and I'm going to preview this one with this set of codes. And you can see this is very different, isn't it? So it depends on how much or how little detail you want. If you want to show the dates the guys were there, anything, all those codes that you printed out control how it prints out on the invoice. Very good. Now if you're first getting started with things and you don't know what your codes are, you're kind of doing these previews to kind of learn what codes you want to use. Once you've determined the codes that you want to use, you can set them up in Cobra permanently so that the next time you add new customers to Cobra, they will be set up with the default format code. So I'm going to click in default, the default button on the toolbar, and because I came into here from Billing Center, the invoicing one is open. We'll talk about these defaults more in greater depth in the lesson called Other Invoicing Options. But for now, I'm concerned about the customers. This is where you can preset their format codes. So when you enter new customers, that's the format code that they'll get. Now, if you already have customers built in your Cobra, you've been entering them, but you need to change the format code, or maybe your customer database was customized by Cobra, converted perhaps from an old system. Let me take you out to Customer Center for a moment and show you how you can quickly get those into your customer database. I'm going to go into Customer Center. I'm going to click on Utilities, Change Customer Options. This is a great screen when you want to massively change some of the critical information in your customer database. I'm concerned right now about changing format codes, so I want to click this feature on and then select the codes that I want for material and labor. Once I do that, I can click my Save button, and you might need to have everybody in your company do this as well, or at least the people who are entering new customers and doing billings. Excellent. So don't forget to save this once you've done that, because that's when the change takes place. Okay. I'm going to exit back and just go right back into Billing Center. I hit the new button. I'm typing in my job number. I'm pressing Enter. And now all I want to do is make sure that the job is closed at the time I save this invoice. Okay, because this talks to the job. Now this close job option, that's also part of your defaults here too, because each user can control if they want jobs closed as they're creating their invoices. So if you have some users that do T&M and you want this on for those users, please save that as a default, and they'll never have to go and click this close job button. Okay? Otherwise, if other users do primarily contract billings, then they may want this to always be off and then purposely turn it on when they need to. Some other options before I actually save this invoice down here. These are cool options too. You're not going to use them all the time, but you're going to like them when you need them, because although we're just doing a straightforward T&M job and invoicing it out, if you were doing a long-term one or change orders, let's talk about change orders. A lot of people like to build their change orders out as T&M, and as you learn through the change order process, each change order and all the items related to a single change order are posted to the job under their own page that groups them together under their own page. So you could actually limit this invoice to a certain page of job items that are on the job posting screen. Pretty cool option when you need it. Here's also a great option when you need it. It's called limit to date range. So if this is an ongoing T&M job, you could say, well, I only want to bill out January stuff. You could click this on and then select your date range for the job items for invoicing. So some neat options here that you might use. Now I'm ready to actually save my invoice. So once I save it, the invoice number is assigned to it, and it's given a status of PRNT, which means it's ready for printing, but it's not printed yet. So it depends on how I answer this right now, how the status will change. If I say I don't want to print the invoice right now, Cobra will keep the invoice in a print status, and any invoice that's in a print status is on the batch invoice list. So you could save all of your invoices for printing at a later time and batch print them later. You can find out about batch printing invoices in the lesson called Other Invoice Options. I'm going to print this out right now though, so I'm going to say yes. Now, I don't have a printer attached to this computer, so I've told Cobra I want to create PDFs out of my invoices, which is why this window came open. If you like this idea and you want to use PDFs, you can set your printer up for PDFs. But what I do is use the invoice number as a PDF file name. And because I'm creating a PDF, it's always going to go to the internet and open up the PDF website in case you want to buy more of their products. So I just clicked out of that. Okay, now the invoice is open. It's on accounts receivable. I'll show you more about that in a moment, how to find it, how to look at it. I can also see down here on the AR tab that it's 0 days old. Tomorrow this would say 1, the next day it would say 2. So the aging days become very important because your AR reports, your collection reports, your AR aging reports, your statements all show exactly how old each invoice is to the day. So that's an important feature when you want to kind of manage lien waiver situations and things of that nature. You can also see the original invoice amount, how much of it was sales tax, retainage, which obviously in this case we're not tracking retainage. You'll see that later when we do freeform invoices. These are the job costs, information, tax, how much you billed out. And then as you start making payments on the invoice, you'll see this information being updated, the last pay amount and the last pay date. So you can use all this information. Plus, if I click into the accounting records tab, you can see the accounting records for this actual invoice. Now the neat thing about this is the type, because whenever you see INV in the type here under the accounting records, you know that these accounting records were generated when the invoice was actually created. That's why the INV is there. Now some other cool things that I like you to be aware of with the accounting records is the status. Because even an invoice that's in batch that hasn't been actually printed yet will have a status of O here, which means that those accounting records were generated, but they're not hitting any accounting yet because they haven't been finalized because the invoice hasn't been printed yet, which makes sense. The GL date and the GL batch are also critical bits of information, because if you wanted to come in down the road and delete this invoice, which you could do if you have permission to do that, Cobra will warn you and actually not even allow you to delete an invoice that's already hit the general ledger. So it's important to understand what these mean. This is the date that the accounting records hit the GL, and this is the actual batch in the GL. If you needed to further problem solve in GL, that is the batch that those items went into the GL under. Excellent. Now, let's finish up by going back to the job and take a look at things there. So I'm going to click on Go To on the menu bar, Job Center. Bring it all together for you. Now here I am in the Job Center. I can see that this job has been billed out. How do I know? Well, the billed amounts are filled in. There's no suggested billing here because we fully billed out the job. I can see I have one invoice on this job. It's been printed. It's unpaid. Once it's paid, this will move down to here. I can also go into the AR Invoices tab in Job Center. I can see all of the invoices related to the job and their status, even ones that haven't been printed yet. But I can click on any invoice in this list and I can preview it right here by clicking the preview button. I could also reprint the invoice right here. Or if I wanted to investigate this invoice a little more, I could actually go right to Billing Center and not even have to write down an invoice number. Let's take another look at the job itself. If I go into the material items, you can see that all these items now have been tagged with that job number, or rather invoice number. So if I were going to continue on this job and start posting more items, only the uninvoiced items, or the items that do not have an invoice number here, would be available on the next invoice for this job. Pretty cool. Now I'm going to exit back to Job Center and I'm going to go to Customer Center and show you over there. Okay. The customer's AR balance has been updated automatically. If we go into the Invoices tab, we can see all of their open invoices and the dates that they were done by scroll down to the bottom. This is the one that we just did. And again, we can preview it right here, reprint it, or go right to Billing Center right from here. So these are the open invoices, the ones that you'll see on the AR report. These are ones that are either paid or you're working on them. We can talk about work status invoices in a little bit. Or ones that are in print status which haven't been printed yet. They're in the batch. Okay. If you want to learn more about invoice statuses and what you can do with them, you can click into the help system, type the word status, and find the topic on invoice status right here, or just type invoice status up here. Either way, you can learn about the invoice statuses, what you can and can't do with them when they're under a specific status, so that you don't goof up your accounting. Excellent. This ends the lesson on T&M and service invoicing.